All right. What's up, friends? Thanks so much for jumping in. We are uh, excited to do another live interview here on the podcast. So I'm going to do the quick little intro here. We are streaming it over on YouTube, Twitter, and of course into our Facebook group as well. And this will be posted into our podcasting app. And let's see, today was episode 202. So I believe this will be. Let's see. Actually, this will be tomorrow's episode. So how about that? We will get it out right away. So this will be tomorrow's episode. So you'll be able to, if you have to jump in or jump out, you'll be able to be a part of it and listen to the whole thing tomorrow. So with that, let me get this part started. Welcome back to another episode of NFT365. And one of the beauties of the NFT space is it allows us to not only connect with people around the world, but also really open our mind to different possibilities of ways that we can get into the NFT space, the ways that we can leverage this NFT space, and really the ways that we can bring together even passions and hobbies or things in our background into our lives. And part of the beauty of that, if you listen to actually yesterday's podcast episode, I talked about the one platform that I believe everyone that's part of NFTs should be on, and it's not Twitter and not Discord. Well, I kind of, I was a little bit of a lie there. It's actually Twitter Spaces, because I actually think Twitter Spaces is a heck of a lot of fun. And I'm excited to bring in my next guest, Laura. Thanks so much for jumping in. I know you do a lot of Twitter Spaces. I know you're in beautiful Miami at the moment. So if you could introduce yourself to the audience, tell them a little bit about you, and we'll jump into the interview. Oh, we lost you.
No,
Miami's.
are you there?
Oh, there you go. You're back. We're good.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Laura Rod. You might know me as the Miami Ape if you follow me on Twitter. I was born in Colombia, grew up here in Miami, and I am a mental health specialist, which got jumped into the NFT world, which has led me into being a host at several interviews, several conversations, and really building a community. I have been hosting a lot of Twitter spaces in English and in Spanish, trying to like bridge that gap for the Spanish speakers and really for this to continue to be the global economy that it really is. I'm the founder of my own Web3 company right now. We do advising. We have been working on the brand development and also, making sure that anyone coming into the Web3 world understands what is this about community. And that leads us into this conversation about, why is it so important about Twitter Spaces and why are we connected in that platform? I'm working with the Open DAO. It's the biggest DAO on Web3, and hopefully you get to know me a little bit more through this conversation today.
Yeah, no, I love that part. And it's interesting, actually multiple of our guests have had a mental health background and being a specialist in that space. And I think it's a little bit because I relate so easily to that space. Not only, we have the ADHD coin, but, it's something that I'm a big advocate and ally, but I'm doing it more from the standpoint of, where I show up myself individually. I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about how did you first kind of get into NFTs as a whole? How did that kind of segue go from kind of what you were doing, Web 2 to what, you kind of found, kind of a love for in Web 3?
So I would say that I started with the NFT world thinking of this as an investor side, right? I think that at the very beginning, it was me falling in love with crypto and being just like I always call myself, I'm like a baby investor and learning the possibilities and the options that we have through crypto. And my boyfriend got me into NFTs. And at the beginning, I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, I'm not a gamer. There's no room for me in this space. And very quickly, I found out the misconceptions. And this is why I'm such a big advocate at this point, is because there is room for everyone. And for me, my room was in finding the things that I do like, which is, community. It's the socialization aspect of it, the being able to give back and provide, this knowledge and onboard more people. And so far within my journey, I've been able to help more nonprofit organizations that I have worked for or with throughout my life through the last like 15 years and I've been able to create a bigger impact. And you might ask yourself, like, how are you creating a bigger impact? Just by introducing them into crypto, just by introducing them into a different way of receiving donations, by doing collections with our friends in the space, saying, hey, Laura, I know that you're really into this. How can we help? So it was like a combination of passions. I've also worked a lot in event planning and doing live shows. So finding musicians in the space and giving them a platform for them to have a voice and say, hey, you know what? Like, I don't want to sit back and wait for a record deal, when I have fans, and my fans might be able to support my journey. So little by little, I realized that, hey, even though I'm not a gamer, I'm not a software engineer, I might not be in the finance world, like, you know, neck deep, there is still room for me. And finding that voice through Twitter Spaces made me realize that what I was bringing to the table was great, and it resonated with a lot of people, which when I first started, it sounded like there's no way this is not for you. Like, come on, like just go be a social worker in your traditional form or do your life events. But society always tells us kind of like stay in your lane, and I've always been like, no, I'm not gonna stay in my lane. Like there's so many lanes, and life is so fun. Like it's so much more fun to explore them all. So this
I
is
mean,
what it's providing.
I like to say whoever came up with the idea, like, riches are in the niches, was someone that had a niche and they wanted to control everybody just to follow in what they did because that's what worked. And I believe those that can operate a niche, more power to you. I'm fully supportive, but I'm with you. Multi-hyphenated. I want to be doing, lots of things, tapping into, lots of our background. I love that you kind of, brought that into the, your view of the space. And we'll talk a little bit about Twitter Spaces in a second, but I'm curious, did you have like a project or an experience that gave you that, like that aha, that like, oh, wow, this is more than just crypto pictures and it's more than just for gamers? Because I was very much like you. I was like, it's cool, but it's not really speaking to me. I wasn't a gamer. I wasn't in the finance space. But like, what was your like aha moment that you had coming into the space?
At the very beginning, it was through making the decision to buy a board ape, and seeing how they had this innovative idea where we were going to be the brand, and then we were going to develop that brand. And as I mentioned before, my boyfriend was the one that got me into the space, and he's a very successful businessman. He does e-commerce, and he's the one in charge of the branding of the company. And he's like, you have no idea how powerful this is. And to me, like I said, I was like, I always like to like stay curious and really explore different avenues. The aha moment was, you know what, this is a brand that's basically telling everyone, hey, you know what, you're the owner, let's go ahead and build this together and let's benefit from it. Which sounds very optimistic or too much like, oh, whack me, right? um, so at the beginning there's a sense of skepticism, and are they really going to be able to deliver this? And little by little you start seeing how everyone kind of started developing, not everyone, a lot of people started kind of developing a brand around their board ape. And you saw the board ape founders really giving back by saying, hey, you know what, we're going to give you a mutant, right? Or we're going to give you a dog, and then we're going to give you ape coin, and we're kind of thanking you for holding and believing in the project that we're building. Yet you're having, I don't know, music videos popping up with board apes. Then you have a board ape restaurant that I got to visit when I went to LA. So I think in that sense that was my first aha moment, where there is power in the masses, and if you do something different and something innovative, you might move people to work together at, in this new world. And what I see moving forward was the opportunity of other people creating something different. And I think that's where sometimes we get stuck, but as soon as someone pops up with something cool and new, then it's, I don't know, hopeful again.
I love that. And I have to, we had actually one of our first interviews on the podcast was Franklin, who owns 46 Bored Apes or so now. And it was great, like just hearing his point of view. But we also brought up, this was after NFT NYC, and I was there at NFT NYC. I don't own a Bored Ape myself, but many of the people in our community were there. And, there was a lot of conversation around, female representation in Bored Apes, minority representation in Bored Apes. What was your initial kind of like feeling as you joined that community? Because I know a lot of people in our community didn't have that luxury. Where they'd love to know how was it from like your point of view, from someone that was kind of in there with Bored Apes kind of early on?
So at the very beginning, it's funny that you bring up Franklin, because when I started in this in this journey and started being more active in the Twitter spaces, Franklin was one of my first friends. And he's like, oh, we should do like a post of like ape follow ape and get you more followers on Twitter. And I was like, huh? For what? Like, thank you. Like, that's really sweet and that's really nice, right? That you want to welcome me into the club by getting me to, but I don't need more followers. Like, what are followers for? Um, so so to me, my mentality of someone very traditional when it comes to, I didn't care about followers. All my social medias were private. If you would have asked me a year ago, hey, is this what you are going to be doing in a year? My answer, never in a million years, would have been this, which I like and I'm happy about. But so my welcome into the space was um, more positive per se. I think that by having that introduction, and I was like, sure, okay, let's do like an ape follow ape. And he said, you have 1,000 followers by tomorrow. I'm like, woohoo, thank you. Like, should I be happy about this? Like, and little by little, I realized that when you have followers, what you're really building is a community, and you're making friendships. And if you have an audience of people that are interested in a topic that you care about and that could make an impact, then all of a sudden those numbers matter, and they matter because it's not a bot. It's not, follow me and I'll give you $1,000 for free every day. Of course, I'm gonna have a bunch of random people, but yet little by little you have built these relationships, and you feel like now they're your friends, right? And then sometimes, like, I don't even know what my friend looks like, and I just know their PFP, and I know what their ape look like, or I know whatever NFT they have. And that was really exciting. But back to the question, sorry that I rambled on. I think that it was very hard to see at the very beginning, no, not many women speaking up, right? Like, I would join Twitter spaces and I would see like a room full of like 10 guys, and I'm like, someone go talk. And then that's when I realized that, like, I can't wait for other people to come and be that change or be that representation. Like, if it bothers you, I get it, right? It used to never bother me because I was in an area of expertise that, like, there's a lot of women in social work. There's a lot of women in my classes. There used to be a lot of women. So when I saw that difference, I was like, okay, I'll go talk, and then I would listen to conversations. I'm like, they don't know more than me. I'm here like sitting back thinking like, oh, wait, so-and-so has like the smartest thing to say. And I'm like, wait, but I could participate in the conversation. I might not be the smartest one in the room every time, but that doesn't mean that your input is not important. So little by little, we see that change. And now I think we have a lot more women representing. And I think it's more comfortable when you get into a room and you're like, okay, we all look different, right? We all sound different. However, it's important what you bring to the table. And with that message, that inspired me to continue.
I love that. And we had Board Becky on the podcast as well, and she talked of a very similar experience with her entry point into Bored Apes. And I think it's such an interesting part. I have a phrase that I coined that says raise your damn hand, and you pretty much embodied it, right? It's the idea of like, who are we waiting for? Like, no one's going to give us permission, and if someone's waiting for permission, like, we're giving it to you right now. Like, this is your permission to raise your hand. And I love that you kind of took that on, right? And there is something that when you have that like moment when you're like, wait, we're all learning this together, and all we're sharing is our unique perspective. Like, I don't need to be an expert. I don't have to know everything, because let's face it, this space changes so much. I'm curious, you mentioned, new to, private social, newer, kind of like the Twitter side of the house. When you look back at like how you're able to show up there, not only, make connections, I can imagine that was never a problem, in offline world. You're in the hotbed of a crypto, and NFTs in Miami right now. In the first place, I got to, be there at Miami NFT week and got to experience how amazing that was. I'm curious, like, what would you say, like, if you were talking to other women in the space that were like skill sets that you could tap into from your, kind of prior life that really allow you to excel here? Because I think a lot of people are assuming you have to be an expert in all these other places, but we're all figuring that out. So what would you what would you lean on and say, because I had experience doing this, it helped me to kind of really find my footing here in the NFT space?
I really do think that it's more about getting to know what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, more than what kind of experience or private experience do you need to have in order to be successful in the space. I really do believe that whatever sets of skills you currently have, it's more about having the time and the disposition, because this is not going to be something that you're going to fully understand from sitting 2 hours on trying to get NFTs, right? Like I have people that tell me, hey Laura, like I want to understand. And it's like, okay, but like this is not gonna take you 2 hours and all of the sudden it's gonna click. Like what might click for me might not click for you. So I think having more of the disposition of wanting to learn, of being patient, that like, hey, you know what, you're not gonna learn everything at once. And little by little finding that area where you're like, you know what, okay, this clicks for me and this is what I'm good at, right? And identifying that. So in my case, speaking with people, right? I'm really curious about cultures. Like I love traveling. Why do I love traveling? And I always question this. It's not for me to like become an influencer and like, oh, look at my lab culture. It really was about the me and what am I doing in a Twitter space? I get to speak with someone that lives in Australia, and then 2 minutes after, it's like, oh, I'm in Nigeria, and then everyone in Latin America, and then some people that are like, oh, I don't speak English, yet I could translate, and now it's a big deal, you know. And now it's important that I get to translate from an artist that might not have the language, but their art is freaking amazing, and they just
Oh, we lost you there for a minute. Now you're back. We're good.
sorry. Okay, so basically, so what I'm getting at is it's really finding what moves you and what's going to drive you besides the financial possibility of making money, right? If you're an artist, like of course you might get frustrated. It's eye-opening situation where, hey, this is a global economy. It could lead to financial freedom, but the connections might lead to that, right? And the genuine relationships. And it might not mean for you to have to make a sale every single day to be successful in this space. So for someone that's brand new, that is like, I have no idea, and you're curious, just learn. Learn the technology, learn what it's for, how can we use it, and then through that, you might have a spark and an idea that's yet to be created. I think that there's a lot of solutions and work to be done in the space that maybe you come up with it and you just think, oh, I'm so late, right? And it's like,
Right.
no, you're at the perfect time, just do it.
No, I love that, and I think that's such powerful advice. Not only kind of finding what you're good at, right? I think it's how do we help others? We first have to really understand ourselves and what we can bring to the table, but also when we bring things to the table, kind of see where that kind of evolves or fits in the space. I'm curious. I know a lot of people when they hear someone has a Bored Ape, especially if they got in early, there's like the must be nice to have a Bored Ape conversation. I always say the flip of it is like, how the hell did you not sell the Bored Ape as the prices were going up? So I'm curious, just like, how have you looked at it as a whole? Because, for those that don't recognize, yes, there's been the mutants and the dogs and the other side and ApeCoin, but if you're not one that's actually taking any of those and flipping them out, you're not technically making money at the moment on that asset that you have. Have you had any of those moments where you were thinking about selling, or how have you approached that as an ape holder for so long?
Honestly, it's tough. I think that making the decision to buy the Bored Ape with my partner, with my boyfriend, has helped us, because when he wanted to sell, I'm like, no. And when I'm like, absolutely not. And whenever I'm like, oh my God, this is a lot. Like, we should really sell this. Like, F this. Like, I'm sorry. Like, we should just... And then he's like, really? Like, are you really thinking about this? And then kind of having the community behind it saying, like I said before, like, thank you for holding. I think that was like always a reassurance of, we're building something so much bigger that is not worth it yet. It might be worth it at some point, and I'm never one to say, oh, I would never sell it. This is my forever ape. However, I don't know, if someone were to say like, hey, here's $1 million, I might have to be like, I'm sorry, I love you, and it would be part of our history forever. But there might be an offer that I can't resist. However, I do get people like messaging me saying like, oh, I identify with your ape, can you sell it to me? I'm like, panic, okay, no. So I think doing it in conjunction and really building a brand around it has kept us from doing this, and having that that confirmation from the community. I think that that this is worth it. So
And I think that's, like the IP and the idea that you're building the brand around it, I think is such a powerful dynamic that a lot of people kind of forget about, right? The idea that you do own the intellectual property. And we heard in the news with Seth Green, who was creating an entire sitcom around his Bored Ape, and his Bored Ape being stolen, they had to pause, the sitcom. And, it's an unfortunate aspect of the space. But to me, unfortunately, the media took the story and was like, oh, another picture gets stolen in the crypto space. I looked at it and was like, how amazing is it that you're able to take some multiple NFTs like Seth Green had done and turn it into a sitcom and create content around this intellectual property that he owned. And so I love that you kind of tap that in. I also love kind of having that counter person to help you. Like now that I'm thinking about that, it's like, that would have helped me a couple of times. I joke a lot. Like I flipped out of Alien Friends and like was celebrating this like 0.5 ETH win that I had at like 0.6. And then every time it was like 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 3 ETH. By the time it was going up, I was like, yeah, I needed somebody to check me on that. And it was I think it was like the 67th, most rare there in that collection as well. Which, it's part of that journey. I'm curious, Twitter Spaces and offline events, right? Miami NFT week was a powerful event. Next month, we have NFT NYC. I'm a huge advocate and believer that not only do we have to make a table for everyone, but we have to, hopefully give up the microphone. We have to make space for those that, maybe have not had voices in the past. I'm curious, from a Twitter space perspective, this is a perfect setup because last episode literally was an entire episode of what I believe the intimacy and power of social audio and what Twitter spaces kind of, breathe into this world. But I will also know that a lot of times it's hard to get a word in edgewise. Even someone like me that loves to talk, I will often wait my turn. And that's not always like the cadence inside of Twitter spaces. How have you looked at it to like find your voice and even like a balance between hosting a space versus like joining someone else's space? How do you approach that in kind of your day-to-day journey on Twitter spaces?
I think I really do enjoy hosting. And unless you have hosted Twitter spaces, you wouldn't know how like draining it could be, right? And how to kind of like direct the orchestra and to see, okay, how do I let everyone participate? And if I have people waiting in line to come in and share their opinion, how do I tell whoever is on stage that we have to rotate? Because if you're not familiar with Twitter spaces, you could only have up to 10 people. And I believe like 2 co-hosts. So it's tough, and especially when, like I said, I'm like, if you're building this community of a lot of people and a lot of familiar faces, then you almost feel like guilty, like, oh my God, I have so and so waiting, right, their turn. Yet this other person that I don't know came first. I want to give them a voice too. So I think it's a lot. How I have found myself to communicate that is through transparency. At the end of the day, I'm being honest and kind of saying, hey, I know there are some of you that are waiting and I wish I could bring everyone up at once. If you guys please like want to rotate the space, like I would really appreciate it so someone else could speak. And I try to be as unbiased as I can and bring up, random people that requested first. Sometimes I wonder, I'm like, is this really in order what Twitter is showing me? So it's probably not, right? It's probably not. So I try to like keep up of like who requested first and how do I do this in order not to become like an echo chamber of, your same friends and the same people that you feel safe and comfortable with, which is fine, right? But not if you're trying to make a very inclusive space and a space where I get to meet others, and I get to like really engage with other people. And this is where I also try to balance it out as like, it can't just be me hosting my spaces and expecting you to join every time, right? And I see that dynamic in some people, and that's fine, like more power to you. But deep down, I'm like, I don't like that. Like, who am I to tell you, oh, join my spaces all day, every day, because I'm hosting and I want the audience. Yet I never see you, joining others, and not mine necessarily. So I try to join. I think daily I join a bunch of others. Not all the time I have to be a speaker, specifically because, like I said, I was like, I don't want that to become the narrative, right? Like, oh, every time that you're listening to a space, you need to have the center of attention. And it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes like I'm working and I have it there and I'm listening and I'm glad to be part of the conversation, but I won't jump in to speak. And if I have the time and the topic like gets my attention, I'm like, heck yeah, like I want to participate. So I think there is like a beautiful balance to have where everyone that you have met that are putting in their time to host, it's nice that like, hey, you know what, you came to listen, and other times, hey, you came to participate. And that's where this I try my best to keep it up.
Well, I mean, I think I love that you said the transparency, right? Because that's what I preach as well. And like I did a lot on Clubhouse early on, and there's some things in Clubhouse that we loved that Twitter Spaces could really use. There's things in Twitter Spaces that I love that, and actually last night we host a Twitter Space every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and I was calling out Twitter and saying that, one of the features I wanted was be able to join audio via a desktop or an iPad. One of the other features that I would absolutely love is give us more people on the stage. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. And the funny thing is, I was like, Twitter is as a past client of mine, and shout out to Bev. She messaged me this morning and she's like, someone tagged me or sent me your Twitter space. And I've done some work. And she was like, Brian, you have a very valid point. Like and they've been great at innovating, but there are some really unique nuances. But I love that you mentioned kind of like hosting it. It is, I mean, you're a traffic cop as well as kind of like you have to organize and kind of set the tone of the culture. And by you being transparent, letting people know like, hey, I know there's some new people on stage. We're going to this person next. It kind of level sets for everyone, even those in the audience, to recognize, okay, this isn't just a good old boys club or just the 2 or 3 people talking, which I think is a beautiful recipe. And then the other part I think that you mentioned that I think is so underestimated, and I believe it's NFTs and Twitter Spaces, is that you just have to show up. I mean, the way you learn NFTs is jumping into a lot of projects. The way that you learn Twitter Spaces is being there. And, I'm like you, like I will say, like when I see a bunch of hands raised, those that I know I see in other Twitter Spaces listening and active in spaces, I will pull them up first every single time, because it's like, hey, you're giving, like you're supporting and kind of coming along on this journey. I'm curious, as you mentioned, you do some in Spanish as well. How is that community, the Spanish speaking community, especially Spanish speaking as their first language, how are they looking at NFTs and representation in the space? Because I struggle with speaking just English, so I stick to just English and some NFT jargon. But I'd love to hear like how that transition is going, and maybe what type of NFTs seem to resonate with the different audiences that you're bringing the information to.
I think it's resonating tremendously, and especially from financial freedom perspective, right? I think from giving the hopes back to the artists and saying there is opportunity, and I could live of my art. In Spanish, there's a saying that they're like, oh, you can't live of art, or something like that. And now little by little, it's like, oh, let me show you how I'm living of my art. Let me show you how my art is worthy, and how Web3 is really opening up a real opportunity for financial freedom, and also to build friendships, and to really have full teams of people innovating in the space that happen to be Latino or Spanish speakers, and to me that's hopeful. Like I think that by hosting these conversations, I've gotten to meet so many people. Like one of the teams that I admire the most is like the Cuban community, because I can't imagine what it's like. And then for them to be one of the strongest ones in the space, and one of the ones that came on early on with the help with a lot of people, and for them to like get together right now in Cuba, and they just had like a really big party for one of the NFTs. They're called Crypto Cubans, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like we're talking about like, what? I'm like, you live in Cuba? Like the first time that I would hear them in like Twitter speak, they're like, yeah, we do. I'm like, what? And your art is selling, and I could share your art and someone could buy it from you. And little by little, and to see how they supported one another, from like, how do you get Ethereum? So like the first person that did the sale, they will like help out a new artist in order to pay their gas fee for them to be able to upload their art. And then from that, it just kind of like trickled down. So we go back to like the social aspect and the empowerment. And then there's so many people in crypto in like Argentina. And then I have this like amazing group of developers that they're over like 32 in the company, and they're coming into the Web3 space, and they're utilizing these platforms, and they're creating, so it's really eye-opening into saying there shouldn't be this dynamic where like there's a language barrier that stops us from achieving this, when it's just a matter of having the conversation in a different language. I happen to speak Spanish, but if I spoke like French, then I'll host in French as well. And that's kind of the message that I like to give others, is not segregating ourselves, right? It's more bringing the community together. So by hosting in English and in Spanish, what I'm trying to do is it's not just saying, oh, I want to help out Latinos and bring, that Latino representation to the space, but this is the representation that I get to bring. But yesterday I was hosting a space with someone from Vietnam, like, and then last week I hosted someone that from, their background is Latino, but she's third generation American, with someone from Nigeria that lives in Nigeria, that he's like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to go to the States. So this is the type of like excitement and opportunity, at the end of the day. This might not be for everyone, but how wonderful to be working in a space that might at least open the door for everyone. And if we could all translate that message, it's like, I'm in.
I love that. I love that. I've had the amazing opportunity. I've traveled to 76 countries in my career, and I'm very like proud of that. It's the thing that's probably shaped me the most. And actually, the Middle East region, I've been to every country in the Middle East, and that's my current favorite region of the world. And for me, like that idea of that global connection, like I laugh. I have to keep moving the Twitter Spaces times that we have, because half of my community is, I'm like, hey, we're getting, I'm saying GM and they're saying GN, and I'm like, oh, I forgot that, and it's a little bit of, spoiled American sometimes forgetting that, Australia or New Zealand's on a flip time zone, or Singapore. And I think that is a beautiful, aspect of us being, kind of being able to clued in to amazing musicians and artists. We have an artist, a musician that actually, she's very active in on Twitter Spaces. She's in Germany, and she does amazing. Yes. Oh, she's amazing, right? I mean, we minted her for our collection. She just recently sold out. So, shout out to her selling out as well. And she's one that kept showing up and just being a shining light in this community. And you even mentioned like Franklin, right? And I think it's good just for everyone that recognize that it doesn't matter how many Bored Apes you have, and it doesn't matter how long you've been in the space. There are some bad apples. We can't deny that. There are also some people that are in it for themselves. But the amount of people, no matter where they are in their journey, that are willing to like open up their door. And I mean, I had 2 people in the last 24 hours message me via Twitter and say, is it okay if I take your videos and translate them from my native speaking country? And I was like, is it okay? I was like, what can I do to help? Like, I will give you like all
Yeah. What do you need?
yeah, exactly. And I was like, and I talk fast, so I know that like anyone that's trying to even keep up, like, I mean, the poor translations on any of these apps, they have no, no chance with me. But I mean, I love that you kind of tapped into those pieces. And then you mentioned earlier, you have your own Web3 company. How did that come to life? Because, for many of us, we didn't see ourselves here a year ago. Now, the fact that we're building companies and teams is kind of a wild ride. Talk to us a little bit about your Web3 company that you've built.
So right now, the journey that I was in is that I can't do this alone, right? Like there is so much opportunity, and I never wanted and I never won like the easy way out, right? I think that for a lot of people in this space, once you have a little bit of traction, the easy way out for me, it's like, oh, why don't you just drop an NFT project? And I'm like, wait, but what am I innovating? What am I doing different? And if I do it, and when I do it, I want to make sure that it's something that I could stand behind it and I could be absolutely proud, not just because I could monetize the space in that sense. So my decision was more geared towards, hey, I'm doing this as a team with my partner. I'm doing this as a team with other people in the community. What a better way than to have that foundation first. And this is where we're working on the branding. This is where we're working on, continuing, doing partnerships, by doing interviews, by educating, by onboarding. I've been very blessed to being at some of the best conference so far. Like I did Miami NFT and I was a speaker. One of the topics was like building community in Latin America. Now I'm gonna get to.
You did a great job, by the way. I was in the audience there, and I didn't see very many panels. We were in and out, and I got to sit down, and you did an amazing job. So I want to give you your flowers. That was great.
Thank you for that. And then we got to go to LA for another one, and now we're gonna do New York City NFT. And through all of this, conceptualizing it into the business that it is, and being able to advise and consult and really kind of pick out the projects that we could really see a future in the space, that might just need a little guidance from someone that like lives and breathes NFTs. And this is what the team is doing right now. So I'm very proud of that, and I'm very happy. And I think that the opportunity is to continue to stay open to whatever comes next, right? Like whatever that looks like, and believe that this space, even though we might have like a few bad apples, I always think of like the real relationships that I have built. Like you can't take that away. And it sounds so cliche, but it's the reality. Like we are building real friendships, and during these live events, we just get to like kind of like secure that deal and say, you know what, it's the same person. Like now when you say, oh, we have this great musician from Germany, I'm like, Violeta, like that doesn't happen overnight. Like that
Like,
doesn't. And it's people that deserve it, that deserve their place. Like she deserves that sellout, right? She
that's so
deserves to. So I don't know, to me, like those small wins of other people that you have built relationships that you have no other way of meeting them, like that gives me hope in myself too.
I'm with you on that, and I'll say, I think the relationship piece of being cliche made sense pre-pandemic, but I feel like the pandemic should have woken us all up to this idea of how important people around us are, and no one wants to be alone. And finding our people, and our people show up in all different walks of life and different backgrounds in different areas, and like, I mean, I look at serendipity of NFTs being unlike anything I've ever experienced, where we are able to bring our worlds together. And I'm excited to hang out with you in New York City, as well at NFT NYC, that we'll be hanging out next month. And I also love that, I firmly believe, our mantra of the podcast was built on just the simple concept: we are greater than me. And I believe for a while NFT projects were just the get the me out, get a couple of the right people in, they would sell out. But we've kind of flushed through a lot of that, and we've seen a lot of those projects disappear. And I do believe projects like the mindset that your approach that you're taking, like just dropping an NFT because I can and because I believe I can make something in the short term, does not do anything for you or really the community as a whole. And so I think the more of us that we kind of gang together and we recognize that, like, I in August I was like, you know what, I'm gonna plan an NFT project. And come November, we decided, do I launch a daily podcast or an NFT project? And we chose the daily podcast. And for me, it was like, at the 6-month mark, let's check back in, because I feel like I've earned the trust of the community by showing up every day for 6 months, right? Like, and I think that's the testament. Like, even little things, like I could mention a musician from Germany, and you mentioned Violeta. It's because we put in the time, we've listened, we've cared about the community. And it's really not like, what is Violeta giving to us? Well, she's sharing her beautiful gift. But it's also this idea of like, how amazing is it? Like, how many musicians are undiscovered right now? How many artists are ridiculously talented probably in our neighborhoods that have never just given the opportunity? And I believe, those of us that are able to build some of these foundations are going to be able to lift, a lot of them up. And I think it's just going to be amazing. I mean, I don't think we could ever have too much music or too much art or, too many, kind of positive opportunities, for us to experience some great things. Before I kind of let you go, I know you're in beautiful Miami, and for those listening, you might hear like the beautiful sounds in the background.
Sorry of the nature.
I love it. I love it. I feel like I'm sitting on your back patio there in Miami. You've been to some of the NFT events, right? And there's, sometimes there's a reputation of like, oh, it's all men, or what's going on in this and I like to say, like, whoever's taking these pictures are just really bad at taking a lot of pictures, because a lot of the events I've been at, I've not been in rooms where it's all men, yet I see these pictures that go viral on Twitter. I'm like, who took that photo from like that one angle? But I do know that there needs to be more representation for someone that's like going to NFT NYC maybe for the first time, or thinking about going but unsure. What would be something that you would say for them to think about or realize, or something that you've experienced that might help them kind of push them over the edge to get value there in New York?
I think that sadly, I mean, when I go to some of these events, at the very beginning, it was all guys, like a lot of them, right? And little by little, what happens is that like I said before, the same thing as like in Twitter Spaces. If you want to change the narrative, then you need to show up, right? And if you show up and there's only like 3 girls at the beginning and like 3 women like representing, then stick together. You know what? Like then next time maybe invite another friend, and then now we're a little bit more. But I always think that like whatever we don't like, we need to take that step, because like you said, I'm like, we're not gonna wait for someone to come and like, hey, please come, we need more. Who's gonna show up? Like if we all continue with the narrative that like, oh, every time I go to an NFT event it's only guys, then we need to be more conscious. And the reality is that a lot of the male in the space, they're male allies, which they want to be that, they want to make that change. And it's tough because they're like, how do I do it? Like, how do I have more representations? And I think that these are very conscious decisions that, given if there is, I don't know, whatever, 10 guys, and because of the lack of representation there's only 2 ladies, it might be so much easier for you to host mostly men in the podcast, right? And you might have to go out of your way, because the first people you think, oh shoot, I just thought about 7 people and 6 of them are men,
Right.
just because of the nature of the space. So I think it goes back with every person, like, hey, let's check on ourselves and let's find out, like, are there more women in the space that I'm not including for this event, right? If I'm putting this event together, who am I reaching out? Sure, it might be easier to think of 5 guys that sing instead of like the, I don't know, the 1 girl that sings. But let's try our best, like with the ability that we have. So for this live events, at the very beginning it was intimidating. And little by little, I realized that there are more women in the space and that they might just need a little push. So I'm the one like texting them. I'm like, hey, are you going to this event? Like, I'm going. Can we go? It might be only guys. Oh, well, it'll be more guys and us. And it is what it is, and maybe next time we'll get someone else. A lot of girls that are wanting to be in the space. And I think it's changing. I think now in New York City, I'm hopeful that we're going to see that kind of like balance it out.
Yeah, I'm hopeful as well,
For
and yeah, and I think that I love that you brought up, kind of like the, that ally limbo, and I also think for anyone that's organizing anything, what's easy or lazy is not acceptable, right? Like just the fact that it's easy to think of 5 men because there's more men in your feed does not mean they're the most valuable for your audience. And like for me, like that's the part. Like I probably, as much time as I spend buying these NFTs every day, doing the daily podcast, my team knows, like, we get an influx of requests to be guests on the podcast. And for me, I do just as much research as on that guest as I would on buying an NFT, because I want to make sure that they're the best for my audience. I want to make sure that we have, different viewpoints that I can bring people in, but also at the same time, like, I know that I'm showing up on all these Twitter spaces. I know that I'm showing up and connecting with people that are connecting me with others, right? I co-host, Alpha Mondays with Shira and Manushka, and I look at them as 2 of the most powerful women in this, in this space. And I laugh with Manushka all the time. I'm like, any alpha groups you want to get me into? And she's like, oh, I was like, hey, your alpha groups are way better than, the ones that I'm, kind of being asked to be a part of. So I love that you brought that up. I'm excited to meet you and hang out there in New York City. Anything like you love that we kind of missed or you'd love to kind of cover? I'll give you kind of the microphone here at the end, to share anything that we've missed. And we'll include some of, your links and things in the bio, of course, and people will see us hanging out in New York very soon. But I really enjoyed having you on. So the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that that I made it to the podcast. I want to commend you for sticking every single day. This is not an easy task. Like, it's a lot of commitment. You're also depending on a lot of people to join, to be here committed, and to share with your audience like the best of the best, when you have to do it every single day. Like that's not an easy task. That's not an easy role to take on. So I first want to commend you for doing that, and for really caring about the space, and taking the time, like you said, I'm like, to explore what different people are doing, different perspectives. Like, to me, that's all like so fun. I can't wait to meet you in New York. If I could add anything else for the end of the conversation, is to always check back like our own biases, right? Like, we all have them, and for more than we would love to live in a world without biases. Like, the problem is not having them, the problem is not identifying them. And I think that if you have a platform, you have a responsibility, regardless of how big or little, to really check back on you and find out, like, hey, is it something that I'm biased from, right? Or are they really doing something awful? And if they are, well, fine, like go to the next person. But if they're not, then let's share that mic and let's share that conversation and the spotlight for us to have like more innovation in the space. You know, we don't want to be an echo chamber. There is a lot of room for for new projects and new solutions that we need, and that's what the technology is for. I might not have all the answers, but perhaps the newcomer that you're giving the opportunity to welcome them into the space might come up with it, right?
Yep.
And we're in a very wonderful position to be at, and to, I don't know, continue to support everyone around you, and I think that through that, then we're all going to be more successful than to just think me. So back to your saying, right?
Yep.
It's a we community, and that's how we get there. So thank you again for having me, and I can't
Thank
wait to.
you. I mean, I love that you brought that all full circle, right? We have to acknowledge our biases, and Laura Rod is the Miami Ape on Twitter, growing that Twitter following now. Even though at first it was like, why is these? Yeah, it's coming along great. And I will also just say, like, I think there's a beautiful opportunity in this space for us to like learn and listen together, right? And I think creating spaces where you can recognize your biases, or show up and say, hey, what are some of the things that I might be missing? And I love that you kind of tap that in. That was a beautiful way for us to wrap a bow on this episode. And for everybody tuning in, like, this is a beautiful time. I just like saying that we're all just getting started, right? It's not that we're all early, but we're all just getting started. And if you have an opportunity to go to an event in your local area, I know Austin, Texas has an event coming up early June, NFT NYC. I know there's an event going on in Arizona end of July. I know a couple of events that are happening in August over in the UK. Seize these opportunities. Like, I truly do believe, it's amazing what we're able to do online through Twitter Spaces and interviews like this, but it's even more powerful, when we can turn them into, handshakes, hugs, and some selfies. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. And for all our listeners, we will see you tomorrow. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.